5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the Chequered Flag podcast. My name's Harry Benjamin. Coming up, we've just witnessed qualifying for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix where Max Verstappen has taken pole position. We'll dissect that alongside the debut of Oliver Bearman racing this weekend for Ferrari, in for Carlos Sainz. All that and more in a moment. But first, Formula One has found itself under the spotlight for its off-track controversies over the last few weeks, and the Red Bull Christian Horner scandal continues to evolve. The BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson joins me. Andrew, what's the latest on the situation?
Well, Harry, it's emerged today that Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko is at risk of being suspended in the midst of the continuing controversy over Horner. The 80-year-old Austrian could face disciplinary action as a result of an internal investigation. A source close to Red Bull has told BBC Sport that the plan was to suspend him. Marko's told the Austrian broadcaster ORF, let's put it this way, ultimately I'll decide for myself what I do. The theoretical possibility always exists. It's obviously a major development. Helmut Marko is effectively the power behind the throne at Red Bull. He was a close ally of Dietrich Mateschitz, the former co-owner who died in October 2022. Basically Mateschitz's eyes and ears within the team since it existed. Obviously now Mateschitz is no longer. Marko's position is more vulnerable than it used to be, and it seems that this is a continuation of the power struggle that's been going on at Red Bull since these allegations first emerged, and even longer before that. Actually, there were issues within Red Bull last year. They were mostly kept under wraps. Let's bear in mind that it's only a week since Jos Verstappen, Max's father, said that the Horner controversy was driving people apart within Red Bull and that the team would explode if he remained in position. Let's just recap a little bit on this. I'll be as brief as I can. Leading up to this weekend's race, the woman who was at the centre of the allegations against Horner was suspended by Red Bull. And obviously that comes a week after Horner himself, after being the subject of an internal investigation within Red Bull about the allegations. The board decided on the eve of the season opening Grand Prix to dismiss those allegations, and he remains in position. We'll have to see how it develops. What's interesting, of course, just if we take a step back from all of this, is that Horner had allegations against him, but was not suspended. Now it seems as if Marko had allegations against him. We don't know what they're about yet, but he may be suspended. So why the difference in treatment between the two people? People will view it as part of the continuing power struggle at Red Bull between the Thai majority owners, who are believed to be backing Horner, Shalom Uvidya, who controls the 51% shareholding from Thailand, turned up in Bahrain to give Horner his public backing at the same time as Jerry Horner, Christian Horner's wife, did. And the Austrians, 49% shareholders, believed to be wanting Horner gone, but they're not winning that battle at the moment. So as ever, as we've been saying for quite some time now, this story looks like it's got quite some legs.
Well, yeah, it's messy, isn't it? And it's clearly not ending. Where does it end for you? How much further do you think this has got to go?
Well, I guess it ends when someone wins the power battle. But the question is, who is that going to be? And one dynamic that we need to throw into this is Max Verstappen himself. He intervened along with his father Jos last year when in the power struggle between Marko and Horner. He intervened on Marko's behalf. So if Max perceives Marko to have been wronged by whatever's going on in this latest development, how is he going to react to that? One suspects not very positively. And it's also worth bearing in mind in that context that when Verstappen turned up at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix this weekend, obviously his news conference on Wednesday was mainly focused on this situation surrounding Horner and the comments that his father had made in Bahrain. And Max said his father was not a liar. And when he was asked if what he thought about people considering that Jos was speaking for Max effectively or representing his view, Max said he could understand if that was the case. Asked whether he'd spoken to his father about the comments, he said, "I speak to him all the time. It's me, my dad, and Raymond," that's Vermeulen, his manager, all together, and that will always be like that. I guess he clearly felt like that. But from my side, it doesn't matter being on one side or the other side. Of course, as a son of my dad, it will be weird to be on a different side. Now, these are very carefully chosen words, but what they are not is an explicit backing of Horner. In fact, 4 times in the course of the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, Max Verstappen was asked whether he had complete and total faith in Horner as the team principal of Red Bull, and he gave a qualified answer every single time.
Well, this story still clearly has some legs to go. We'll let you go for now, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. And this is a continuously evolving story, so to keep up to date with all the very latest, keep an eye and stay tuned to the BBC Sport website. But let's now focus on the on-track action, though. And also joining me is former F1 driver Jack Aitken. And Jack, Max Verstappen starts on pole position, his 34th career pole position. It was his from the get-go, really, and it's his race to lose, right?
Yes, I think we've already seen in practice that the continued dominance of that Red Bull in long-run pace, especially for Verstappen rather than Perez. You know, Perez was nearly averaging half a second a lap slower than Verstappen in those long runs in FP2. The Ferraris and the Mercedes and possibly now the Aston Martin of Alonso, they're all pretty close actually, along with Perez. So the fight for the final 2 podium spots is going to be a pretty interesting one, but really Verstappen's going to need some bad luck or misfortune to strike to not be on the top step.
Over 3/10 clear as well from the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and his own teammate Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Considering though, actually throughout the weekend on 1 lap pace, Verstappen hasn't looked quickest from the get-go. Around about 3rd fastest we kind of predicted from the short runs, the qualifying runs that we saw in FP3, but still to have 3/10 as the margin on the rest of the field is quite ominous, isn't it?
It's pretty impressive once again. I mean, it's a word that we used to describe Verstappen quite often, but I think it's deserved, frankly, and he's showing once again that he's not affected by all the shenanigans off track and not shenanigans, there's quite a lot happening off track, but he is just imitable at the moment and cannot be stopped. So it's an impressive performance, and it's tough for his opponents to stay motivated, I would imagine, in the light of this domination.
Well, he'll have the best view in the house for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think overall the whole day was just very good. You know, we made some little good improvements for me on the car, and I felt more comfortable to push. And that's, of course, very important around here in Jeddah, and especially then getting into qualifying, everything was just getting better and better. You follow the track evolution, and I didn't really have any big problems. So I'm, of course, very, very happy with that.
What are you expecting from the likes of Charles, Sergio, Fernando in race trim?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we just focus on ourselves. I think yesterday already we could check a bit how the car was handling over the long run. We made some more improvements for today, so hopefully, of course, it will work also for the race.
Max Verstappen then will start on pole position and will share that front row with the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, who pulled that lap out of the bag in the final stages. It was Alonso was looking quite quick at one stage, but it ended up being the Ferrari that was able to split the 2 Red Bulls. And Ferrari have been looking good all weekend.
Yep, and on 1 lap pace, I think especially it looked like they could potentially challenge Verstappen, but it didn't quite come to fruition. Verstappen found an extra gear through qualifying. Leclerc was still trying things through the last session of Quali 3, trying a different warm-up procedure for the first run. They didn't like that. He found that a bit weird and couldn't quite get the tyres to work. Then reverted back to more of a normal setting for the final run and was able to put in a very decent lap to pip Checo Perez to 2nd place. So it's a good performance from Leclerc and Ferrari, and it's good that when they have the potential, they are getting ahead of their rivals.
Let's hear from him now.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. However, I felt like since FP3 this morning, we lost something with the tyre preparation, especially the tyres didn't fill in the right window on the first lap. Quite inconsistent with the rear tyres, and this will have to check in order to get better for the next race. However, it's still a positive result, another front row, and hopefully we can maximize all the points tomorrow.
And can we get a few words on your new teammate for the weekend, Oliver Behrman, the performance he put in qualifying? What did you make of that?
I mean, Ollie has been extremely impressive. Straight from the get-go in FP3, the first 3 laps were on it straight away. and he seemed to be very confident with the car straight away, which is a really good thing to see. And yes, I really hope that tomorrow we can have a great race. It's going to be a very special moment for him. I remember my first race, and it was in Alfa Romeo, and I could prepare for it 2 months before. For him, he got the notice this morning to race with Scuderia Ferrari on a track like Jeddah. So lots of things to be excited about, but I hope he can sleep well tonight anyway in order to be fully ready for tomorrow.
What has Leclerc got to focus on then, going down into turn one? Because that will be the only opportunity he will get to even challenge Verstappen and just hold him up for a short while at least.
The run to turn one here is really important because after the first turns 1 and 2, there isn't really an overtaking opportunity then until turn 13, quite a bit later. It's all high-speed sections where there isn't really a braking point, and therefore it's very hard to draw alongside your opponent. So he's got to try and get alongside him going into turn one. He's on the dirty side of the grid, but that means that he could have the inside line if he gets a good launch. Unfortunately for him, Verstappen's launches have been pretty good so far this season, or for the one that we've seen this season so far. So it's going to be a challenge. But if he can get ahead, track position means quite a lot around here.
And we know Verstappen, even if he does either start behind or has a rough start, he's not afraid to get his elbows out. I remember Vegas last year, the front row between Verstappen and Leclerc. Verstappen wasn't afraid to barge through on that occasion.
No, definitely not. But it is the only hope that Leclerc and any of Verstappen's rival have, is to get ahead of him, see if you can make something happen, hold him up for just long enough. But even then, as you say, it's a slim chance.
Well, Leclerc will be on the front row for the 7th consecutive race, carrying through from last season. He will start in front of Sergio Perez. He's managed to split the Red Bulls. The Mexican, the number 2 driver in that team, pressure on him this year to be closer with Verstappen, to be second when Verstappen is leading, and to have been pipped to the post by Charles Leclerc. I know it's fine margins. I know it is. And I don't want to go all in hard on Sergio Perez.
But we're going to anyway.
Because Max Verstappen is formidable and he is one of the greatest of all time. But Perez third, that's not good enough, is it?
I mean, these are the situations when they need Perez to be on the front row, not the situations when the Red Bull is half a second clear of the entire field, not just Verstappen but the car. You know, Ferrari challenging for that front row spot is the time when they need to maximize everything in the second car to lock out the front row, give a bit of protection to the team and track position and superiority in that sense. And Perez can't do it. You know, he said himself in the post-quali interviews that he doesn't think that he could have done the lap that Verstappen did. And it's looked like that for most of the weekend. You know, occasionally in practice he would put a lap in that actually was quicker than Verstappen, but he cannot get that consistently, and he cannot find that pace time in, time out. So, and certainly not on the long run running. So, it continues to be the same story really in Perez versus Verstappen.
Well, Sergio Perez will start third. The man who has been on pole here the last 2 races will have to do some work to try and get ahead of Leclerc and even try and get on terms with his teammate. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin once again with a fantastic lap in qualifying, 4th fastest. At one point, I actually thought he might be the one to split the Red Bulls. In the end, his quickest lap was half a tenth slower than Perez in front. So again, not much in this, but Alonso from 4th, good qualifying. Will he drop back in the race though?
We're not sure. I think probably is the answer, but there is hope. You know, Alonso was playing down their chances after Friday's practice, saying, you know, we were a bit flattered. We run our engine modes a little bit higher than some of the other teams traditionally, run the car a bit lighter. You know, the time isn't as good as it looks. And yet there he is in quali. You know, he said himself that it was a great lap that he did early in the session. He picked up a cheeky toe from Hamilton, who was finishing a lap, to get a little bit more time going into his final attempt, showing all of his, canny tricks, as he is known to do. And I'm sure he's going to use all of that wisdom in the race as well to try and hold that track position. You know, the tyre degradation issues that they suffered in Bahrain aren't going to affect them here at this circuit. There's every chance that the Aston Martin will come good.
Well, Alonso was on the podium in last year's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's see if he can do it again. Let's hear from him.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I think for us, the one lap performance seems very strong on this car. It was strong in Bahrain. It was strong in all the free practices here. And now in qualifying, we confirmed that we are in the mix with McLaren, with Mercedes, which is a little bit of a surprise. In Bahrain, we were strong in one lap, and we finished on our natural position, maybe on the race, 5th fastest team behind the top 4. So tomorrow we want to avoid that. We start P4, and hopefully we are not falling behind the Mercedes and the McLaren.
Yeah, so what's the mindset for race day? Are you looking forwards or maybe in the mirrors?
We look at the mirrors. Unfortunately, at the moment, we have to have the feet in the ground. 5 days ago, we were clearly the 5th fastest team, so I don't think that could have changed, so rapidly. So I think we qualified extremely well in the last 2 events, and now we did some setup changes to improve the race performance. We will only have the answer tomorrow night after finishing the race, but let's see. But I think it's a defensive race tomorrow.
Alonso then will start this race from 4th on the grid. Coming up later, we'll have a look at the midfield battles and the scraps between the Mercedes and the McLarens, and also take a look at the latest addition to the Formula One grid, the young 18-year-old driver, Oliver Bearman, who makes the step up in place of Carlos Sainz. We'll dive into his performances and what we can expect from the race in part 2. Welcome back to the Chequered Flag podcast. My name's Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former F1 driver, Jack Aitken. And Jack, your Formula One debut came last minute for the Chequered Grand Prix back in 2020 when George Russell had to stand in for Lewis Hamilton. You got the call up to take part in the race weekend with Williams in your first Grand Prix entry. The very same thing has happened this weekend with Oliver Bearman, the young 18-year-old British driver who makes the step up into the Ferrari seat of Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz having to withdraw due to being diagnosed with appendicitis. He's already undergone surgery and is now out after a successful surgery and is recovering. We wish him very well and hope to see him back in a couple of weeks' time for the Australian Grand Prix. But Bearman, unlike yourself, well, you got FP1 and FP2. He got thrown in at FP3, qualified 11th. How have you rated Bearman's performance so far this weekend, and what are you going to expect from him come the race?
It's been really fascinating for me, along with the rest of the world, to watch Oliver's debut, his first day in school. He's been helped by a few factors. Things like he was already here, so it wasn't a last-minute dash to get out to the airport and fly out. Quite a long trip to Jeddah. He had qualified on pole in the F2 quali just before being called up, so he clearly was in tune with the circuit. He's driven both the Ferrari and the Haas before in official sessions and in private testing as well. So he's got a few kilometers under his belt despite his tender age of 18. And he's generally just a very talented guy, it looks like, as well, which always helps. So he performed extremely well when he jumped in for FP3. The very first run that he did, he looked very natural. He looked very smooth. He was straight away within half a second of Charles Leclerc, one of the fastest guys on the grid. And you cannot ask for more than that. And he didn't look like he was putting a foot wrong. It was brilliant. And I think there is a sense of, can he do more when we went into the qualifying? Is he actually going to surprise us and pull out something special? And although there's not a lot of pressure on him because Charles Leclerc is such a force in F1, no one really expects him to get that close to Leclerc or beat him. And everyone knows that he's been called in at the last minute. He's missed most of the practice. All of these things against him. Despite all of that, Oliver will know that this is a very, very special opportunity. And it's a feeling that all drivers have when these things come up. I certainly felt it when I went into the Chequered Grand Prix. You know that these things can make your career, not necessarily break it, but it could be one of the very few opportunities in your career that you get to really make a mark, to take that big leap forwards into a team. He's in contention for the seats at Haas next year, for example, and he knows that this is the perfect shop window for that. And I think that just started to get to him a little bit in the qualifying. It's absolutely no discredit to him. He did a fabulous job to finish in P11, 0.03 of a second out of getting through to Q3, and just half a second off, or 0.6 off Leclerc, I think, at that point. But it was a slightly messier lap. he looked a little bit more tense. The body language of that car just wasn't quite as smooth as we saw at the start of FP3 when he first got in the car and things were flowing. It was just his first attempt. Now he knew that it was crunch time. The lap times were going down, and he made some small mistakes. A little lock up here, going a little bit wide there, brushing the wall on the way into one of the fastest corners on the track. And he couldn't quite do it. And I'm sure that he's going to be beating himself up about that. He still has tomorrow's race, fortunately. And it's going to be full focus now for him on that. He's going to be deep into the debrief, the numbers, the data with his engineers, trying to find what he can do better. And that's going to absorb him. So I don't think he'll have too much time to sit back, reflect, and beat himself up too much. But yeah, it's that mindset of a driver. You always want more, and this is a really, really unique opportunity for him.
Yeah, just to give a bit of background on Behrman as well, if you're unfamiliar, from Chelmsford in Essex, just 18 years old, 2021, the German and Italian Formula 4 champion in the same year. That's what really sparked a lot of eyes on Behrman. Then made the step up to Formula 3, finished third, made the step up to Formula 2 in his debut season, finished sixth with 6 podiums, 3 pole positions, 4 wins, and now back for another season in Formula 2, is expected to be a championship contender. And as you said, Jack, he achieved pole position in the F2 race for this weekend, has had to withdraw from that race now because he's focused on F1 action. But let's dive in a little bit deeper, because he gets the call. We presume, we don't know the exact timings, but Friday morning, they see how Carlos Sainz is feeling. He's ruled out. You're on the phone. Ollie, this is your chance. What are those first meetings that you're having as a driver? Where are you going? Are you being introduced to people? What information are you getting?
I'm assuming that Oliver already knew a lot of the staff at Ferrari, having done some of the testing and just the way that these academies work. They get exposed to those people at quite an early stage. So introductions, luckily not too many, although there's a huge number of people in the team, so there would have been some of that.
I wonder how his Italian is.
Yeah, well, he's going to have to be working on it, that's for sure. But no, all of the key people he will have already known. So it would have been straight away, right, let's get you into the track. Let's have a briefing for the track and all of the specific processes that we have for Jeddah, because there will be track-dependent things that he needs to know. Then it will be a bit of a touch-up on his knowledge of the driver manual, frankly, because these cars are extremely complex. There are a lot of buttons and switches and processes that you need to know that the engineer needs to be able to get on demand while you're in the car on track. And the rules as well, There's a few things that are quite different from F2 to F1, although the broad strokes are the same. So there is someone in the team that will take him through that just to make sure there aren't any slip-ups. All of these little things, it's a lot. I could go on and on. But that's why I say he's going to have been so busy straight away from Friday morning all the way through to the race.
One of the main things as well will be dealing externally with the scrutiny. We've talked about Behrman since it was announced, the media pressure. How much is that going to affect him?
Yeah, it was a wall of photographers and media personnel in front of his pit box. And we have to remember how young he is as well, even though he's fairly experienced in terms of single seaters, and his career up till now has been very impressive. He's still a young guy, and I think that kind of scrutiny, no one can really prepare you for that. I was I was introduced to that world during COVID, so I didn't have to deal with that. It's a completely different world, the F1 paddock, when you introduce the media, the fans, the VIPs, all of the management that come in to view these races. So he's got to deal with all of that as well, which is an added weight on his shoulders. But that's where his management team have to work to try and protect him a little bit.
You mentioned earlier as well, just even on the steering wheel, the sheer amount of buttons you've got to get to grips with and the different mappings and the sub-settings. How different is a Formula 1 car to the Formula 2 car that he's been driving also this weekend?
It's massively different in a way that I think the junior Formula just doesn't really prepare you for. When you go from Formula 4 to Formula 3, Formula 3 to Formula 2, you get more grip, more mechanical grip, more downforce, more power, slightly more complexity maybe. But at the end of the day, those are all cars that are built to a spec sheet, a budget by one manufacturer. They're given to the teams, and it's kind of you get what you get. F1, every little piece is manufactured to the highest standards that they possibly can. Everything is perfected, tried to improve upon day by day. And you feel that when you sit in the car. It's a machine that feels like the margins are so tight, so well built, and it's a beautiful thing. When you drive that on track, that sensation only grows. So it's a big step, but at the same time, these cars are so brilliant, so accomplished, that it actually makes your job a lot easier in a lot of ways. They're a joy to drive.
Well, it's a lot of pressure for Oliver Bearman, but he's almost got nothing to lose either. He's the youngest ever British Formula One driver in Formula One, and the first English Formula One driver for Ferrari since Nigel Mansell. Let's hear from him.
I woke up this morning focusing on my F2 race, starting P10, trying to think, how can we maximize that? And then, at some stage it was clear that I had to get in the F1 car. What a great opportunity, of course. Huge best wishes for Carlos and his recovery. But it's a great moment and opportunity for me, and I'm ready to maximize it. A bit disappointed with the qualifying, but overall I can't be too disappointed.
It looked like you were really going for it out there. I mean, how do you feel in the car? And it was such a fine margin, wasn't it, to getting into Q3 at the end?
Yeah, it was so close. That's why it hurts a bit more. I made a mistake on my first push, so I had to do it on the second, and the tyres aren't really the best there. So my mistake, and I'll take that one on the chin.
And just finally, what's the mindset for race day?
Just bring the car back, try and get some points. That would be a bonus, but build up my mileage, get some experience. It's my first race, so I can't expect much, and this is a really difficult track as well, so yeah.
Oliver Bearman then will start the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, his first Formula One race, from 11th on the grid, just outside the top 10. And that's kind of crunch zone, isn't it, for Formula One? You're in that mid-pack, especially around a street circuit. What's he got to do and be careful of in the opening laps of the race?
Yeah, and I think you said it. He's got to be careful a little bit. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say to a driver. Never say that. Never that. Let that be
Take
the last
easy,
thing that you
chill.
say. Yeah, be careful. But he will have to keep his nose clean. He knows that. So, it's just a case of staying out of trouble. Like you say, it's a bit of a crunch zone in the middle of the grid. And the first corner here, it's one of those horrible corners that tightens up on you, and then you go straight into another one. There's a curve on the inside that people tend to crawl over and then bounce off and go wide. We saw a lot of incidents last year. So he's got time to build into this race. And, that means that he's got plenty of time to just let the field come to him. He's got a fast car. He's fast himself. I think we know that. And he's only going to get faster as the laps go by. So, yeah, just get through the first lap.
And then I'm going to push you. Where do you think he'll finish? What's realistic?
If I was in his shoes, I would be aiming for the top 6. I think if he can get just inside the top 6, that'd be a really good result. If he can start challenging for the even higher than that, getting towards, the top 2 or 3 teams, that would be brilliant. So it's going to be a tall order, but overtaking is easier here. There's lots of opportunities. If he has the speed, he can do it.
Okay, well, Bearman will have a lot of eyes on him. Let's see how he gets on. In front of him, though, let's move on and have a little look at the mid-pack above him and the Mercedes and the McLarens. Well, they qualify 2 by 2. Oscar Piastri heads the McLarens 5th in front of Lando Norris 6th. Then come the 2 Mercedes, Russell and Hamilton. Let's start with the McLarens. Looking pacey, Piastri, for the second year in a row at this track, out-qualifies Lando Norris.
I think it's been a really strong weekend from both the McLarens, but yeah, Piastri has been the one that has had the very, very slight edge. I mean, the margin between them as they went through quali, sometimes it was thousandths of a second. So those two pretty inseparable so far. It'll be great to see if they can carry that form through to the race. Potentially their long run pace not quite as strong as some of the others that they've qualified around, so they might have a bit of a tough time holding on to those places.
And then they are both in front, though, of the Mercedes. George Russell ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And they've both been struggling with grip, especially rear grip by the sounds of things. And Hamilton, once again, just hasn't looked as comfortable with the car as Russell has. In the end, though, their Q3 lap times only around a 10th splitting them, which is the smallest margin it's been so far. But not all is well at that Mercedes camp, despite the positive signs that came out from the start of the season.
Yeah, they came out thinking that they'd really solved this problem with the rear instability that they'd struggled with all of last year. Became a real bugbear for them. And Bahrain, they thought, yeah, great, we've solved this, moving on to the next thing kind of thing. And they've come out here, and in practice, it's just slowly crept up on them again. And maybe Hamilton's a bit more affected by that than Russell, but he's been well off the pace, frankly. Like you say, quali was the closest that he's been to him all weekend, and that was only really because Russell failed to get another lap in at the end of Q3, making a mistake in Sector 1. So I think the true gap is bigger, and with all the, hype around Hamilton and the news of his move to Ferrari, actually looking at the job that's being done on the other side of the garage, Russell's the one that's leading this team forward at the moment.
Yeah, Russell, with that P7, out-qualifies Hamilton for the 4th consecutive race. Still never out-qualified by a teammate in Jeddah, and Hamilton with 8th. Well, he started 9th on the grid in Bahrain, so hasn't been able to qualify higher than 8th so far. So what do you expect? Do you think they'll be in a good fight in the race with the McLarens ahead of them?
I think they should be able to dispatch them fairly quickly, at least Russell. Assuming nothing really changes between now and the race for Hamilton, he may struggle a little bit more just purely on terms of pace, but the McLarens are one of the slowest in a straight line. That's a real problem for them here, where overtaking is very easy. There's massive DRS zones. I would expect Russell to get through them pretty quickly.
Well, they will line astern. Piastri 5th in front of Norris, Russell 7th in front of Hamilton 8th. Yuki Tsunoda in the RB was 9th, and Lance Stroll rounded out the top 10 in the Aston Martin. And actually, worth picking up on Yuki Tsunoda. Quietly impressive all weekend long, out-qualifies his teammate Daniel Ricciardo for the 2nd race in a row, and especially off the back of a bit of a messy ending in Bahrain with the cool-down antics between the two drivers. This is what Tsunoda needs, and is asking bigger questions of where is Daniel Ricciardo and his pace right now.
I think Daniel is lucky and Yuki is unlucky that there's been so much news breaking over this weekend, because if there wasn't, they might have been more of a talking point. You're absolutely right.
Well, we've got them now.
This is their moment to shine. We cover all the bases here on the podcast. No, I think, yeah, absolutely. Daniel is not performing to the level that was expected when Red Bull brought him back into this team. They really thought that he would be leading the way, using this as a stepping ground really to get it back into the Red Bull team should Perez fail to improve, and that's not really turning out to be the case. Bahrain, he struggled to outperform Tsunoda, and again happening here, Tsunoda's pulled out a great lap in qualifying. Like I've said before, it was pretty disappointing to see the behavior from Yuki on the cool down lap, but it's been a great performance from him here in quali.
Yeah, and one that will, if it continues this way, certainly spark eyes with that 2nd Red Bull seat of Perez coming under intense pressure more and more. Tsunoda 9th, teammate Daniel Ricciardo down in 14th. He'll start just in front of Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. We didn't quite see what Hülkenberg could do, whether he could do a magic lap and get himself into Q3 for the 2nd consecutive qualifying session of the season, because his Haas conked out with some issues in qualifying, so he didn't get to get the full potential out of his car. Further back, though, another miserable day for Alpine. Esteban Ocon 17th, Pierre Gasly 18th, only in front of Logan Sargent and Zhou Guanyu, who couldn't get out to set a lap time, the slowest team once again.
Yeah, it's been a dark start to the year for Alpine, hasn't it? No light at the end of the tunnel. In the early practice sessions from this weekend, we thought maybe that their pace was a bit improved at this circuit, and it's just gone backwards for them as the weekend's gone on and the track has improved in terms of pace. So really disheartening stuff. We had another sort of encouraging / apologetic message from Ocon at the end of quali, but pretty soon that's going to be wearing thin. I think there's a lot of people at that team with a bit of a dark outlook on life at the moment.
And amidst a lot of technical changes going on at that team as well. Let's see where Alpine end up throughout this season. And let's just end with Zhou Guanyu, the Chinese driver for Sauber. Big crash in FP3 and a great effort by the team to get that car ready again. Got him out in qualifying, but just missed getting over the flag by, I think it was mere seconds.
Yeah, heartbreaking stuff for the mechanics. They did a fantastic job to get him out with literally, it felt like seconds to spare. It looked like he was going to do it, but he wasn't quite able to get out of the pits and around to the start-finish line in time. And we were saying at the time that probably it was for nothing anyway, as the Sauber really wasn't showing that much pace. But then Bottas went, and it looked like he was going to make it through to Q2 were it not for some traffic on his final lap. So Zhao, who has been the stronger of the two this weekend, he probably could have made it through. So tough for him, but he can work his way through tomorrow.
Yeah, let's see what he can do from the back of the grid. Okay, that's how they all qualified. The race, though, will be live on the BBC Sport website and app. Max Verstappen starts on pole position alongside Charles Leclerc. It's Verstappen's to lose, but what will happen behind? Hope you can join us for it. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.